Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of His Dark Material. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I'm glad that we finally got the history behind what is now, what we now know as the subtle knife. Because I kept being confused because I assumed, but I guess it's because what I saw in the trailer is when John's explaining the subtle knife, I thought he made it, but it's like, no, apparently philosophers made it, and obviously the guild, and everything. So it's that basically the knife could be used for good or it could be used for just selfish reasons, and the guild did it for selfish reasons, just getting fat and rich off of, taking advantage of the knife and everything. And the knife and I liked how they designed the knife too, because the knife has two, and I like that being a thing, because I thought okay, it can cut into worlds. I didn't realize the knife has two settings. One side of the knife basically can cut through anything, and then even specters, and then the other side of the knife can cut through to other worlds, cut open paths to other worlds. So I thought that was interesting. Kind of seeing that. And also what I thought was kind of neat was about that is you can tell the difference. One side of the knife, you can definitely tell there's subtle design elements on that half of the blade. The other side of the blade is just kind of clear and smooth, but there's almost I don't know what you'd call it, but you can definitely see almost this. I don't know, staining's not the right word, but there's a certain design to it where you can see it especially when the knife's up close, and obviously when the light's reflecting off of it, you can see markings on the blade. So kind of differentiating the two different sides. But kind of learning about that, and obviously the guild is the reason why I'm assuming this comes into play is because the specters coming into their world is mainly because of their own situation. It led to specters coming into the world, but Azrael bursting a hole into the dimensions basically made it a free-for-all, and even more specters came through. But because later on, the previous bearer was telling Will, any opening you make, you have to close or there's danger. So I'm assuming they were opening up windows left and right, and maybe the specters exist in that in-between. If you ever seen Legion, maybe it's kind of similar to the Time Demons. The Time Demons are kind of in their own little pocket of space, and once you start screwing with time, they come out and come into your world. So maybe it's they're kind of beings that exist in that in-between lane, because obviously we still don't really know too much about them. We still don't even really... Well, we've seen what they do. It seems like they basically devour a person's soul. We've seen the aftermath, but we only get a glimpse of what it looks like present day. But it does seem like it seems like it is more they devour souls, because obviously they come after you, and it seems like in some cases you live, but we don't see a whole bunch of other people walking around. So maybe they are full cannibal. Well, not just cannibalistic, but maybe they just straight up devour bodies too. Other than maybe some occasions they just devour the soul, maybe other occasions they devour everything. Because I feel like we've seen only one person that's gotten, Spectre. So you would assume if there were other people like that, there'd be a whole bunch around, but we only saw one. But maybe that's the reason. Maybe everyone else is kind of like that, just kind of lost and just kind of on autopilot, because they've just kind of lost that spark of life, their soul potentially. But regardless, tangents and all that. I really quickly want to talk about this because it was on obviously Lee's looking for Grumman, obviously John Perry, and ends up meeting him. But obviously at first he meets John's demon, and the moment his demon talk, I was like, is that Phoebe Waller-Bridge? I was like, that sounds like, and if you're his demon, and it's lo and behold, I had to wait to the credits to make sure. I'm fairly sure that's the same, because it sounded so much like her, but also her name is in the credits. So I was like, wait, so this is, obviously if you're unaware, but maybe you're aware, it's obviously the actor who plays John, Andrew, because I think last season I called him Adam. It's Andrew Scott. Him and Phoebe Waller-Bridge were in the show Fleabag together. In the second season, he played Hot Priest, she played Fleabag. So I just thought oh, that's neat. And that was 100% on purpose. That had to be hey, let's get these two together again. Like I said, I saw her name in it, but I don't know if that was his demon. Like I said, I heard the voice and it sounded so much like Phoebe, so it had to be her. Of course she had to do that. I was like, that's so beautiful. Because when I started the show and Andrew popped in, I was like, oh, that was the first thing I immediately knew him from. I also forget that, like, because I haven't watched Sherlock in forever, I did forget that he was Moriarty in Sherlock. I might have brought that up last season, but the first thing that came to mind is like, oh my god, it's Hot Priest from Fleabag, because I think, like, I just finished, like, I'd watched Fleabag at that point in time, like, before season 1 of his Dark Material had started, I think. Regardless, tangents and all that. But, obviously we learn a little bit more about John. Obviously for him, you know, because obviously there's a whole conversation about, you know, helping out, Azrael. And even I was like, wait, what? I guess because for John, it's like there's a coming war between those who want to oppress people, make them not, basically what the magisterium is kind of doing now. It's like he's worried, like obviously those are the oppressors, and then there's another side about being allowing people to kind of do what they want, to live their life, to think what they want to. So it's kind of a life of freedom versus a life of oppression. And so, like, obviously those two warring sides is what's going to happen. And I guess despite, you know, him doing some shitty stuff along the way, because Lee's like, I don't like Azrael, and even John being like, who does? Everyone hates the dude. But it's like Azrael represents, like, the fact it's that fight for freedom, that to be able to venture out there. So I guess it's like you don't have to like the person, but you have to respect the mission, because the mission is what, first and foremost. It's like, I guess Azrael, because it seems like you need to get the knife to Azrael because I guess it's necessary for his plans, like, you know, which is so interesting because I guess it's that thing of like what he's doing in the grand scheme of things is kind of for the greater good to a certain extent, but it's like, how much are you willing to sacrifice and kill for the purposes of getting to that, you know, greater good? So, and then obviously, as we've seen, he's done a lot of shitty stuff in that time frame, but it's like, I mean, obviously, like I said, just based on the trailer, I mean, we might get surprised, but it's like, I get a feeling we won't see him at all this season, but, you know. Obviously, for Lee, it's like, I'm not going to do anything. Like, if you're not going to give me what I need to protect Lyra, then I'm out of here, because I'll do anything to help her, not her dad. And it's like, what kind of man leaves his own child behind? And obviously for John, it's like, I did that. And if he explains, like, obviously he thought his work was so important until, you know, he lost his way home. Like, because coming here, like, the way home has been lost to him, so he can't get back to his wife and son. And it's like, I abandoned him because I thought my work was so important. And now it's one of those things of just hindsight of just like, oh, I didn't realize what was so important was right in front of me the entire time. But obviously being stuck in his world, he became a scholar, then a shaman. And, but it at the end of the day, it didn't amount to as much as, you know, he probably originally had hoped that, you know, this, you know, discovery and work of his would matter, you know. And it's like, now, you know, his son's grown up without him being around, and, you know, he misses his wife, you know. So for him, it's like, he hasn't given up hope, but he is kind of basically accepting the reality that at the very least what I can do is make a world where my son can be free, you know. So that's why he's doing what he's, you know, doing. So, and I had skipped over it. What was interesting, though, is like how he was able to kind of interact with Lee, because he's like, oh, I led you here. And Lee's like, no, we got here of our own, like all this stuff. He's like, even me getting this beautiful moneymaker of mine messed up is all on me. It's like, no, like, I guided you here. And he shows him a ring. He's like, this is my mom's ring. I haven't seen it in 20 years. So I chalked that up to be like, maybe like his dad sold it, and somehow, you know, it's probably the thing of like John sensed it out and found it, like, or maybe it resonated with him, or we don't know like fully what he's capable of. He's definitely tapping into some magic. But we don't know the full scale of what he's capable of. Obviously, we saw him guide, you know, Lee to him, you know, or at least in the right direction last episode. So they're kind of venturing off together, and obviously, you know, John is bringing and controlling the wind and kind of sending them in the right direction, because they got to track down Lyra, and obviously the whole knife situation, because obviously it's like the knife bearer, and it's so interesting because despite being as powerful he is, he's not omniscient, because even he doesn't know who the bearer is. He doesn't know that it's his own son. Like, he doesn't know Will's out and about, you know, jumping worlds, you know. So he, you know, so that shows some interesting developments of like, because you would think like he has all the answers, but he doesn't, you know. So even Will being a part of this is a surprise to him. I mean, I guess that's the whole thing about obviously destiny in this and everything, which even that's kind of part of the prophecy and everything, destroying destiny, because even destiny is supposed to lock you down into being like, this is the path you're going to go down. Like, obviously Lyra is supposed to be basically the destroyer of destiny, essentially, So I just thought I think that's all, fascinating. And obviously at the same time, there's a whole situation with Boreal. He tried to get, at Mary's research, because the whole thing is like, if you can understand dark matter, dust, you can basically understand the fundamentals of, like how everything in the universe works, understand the universe in a way that, has never been known before. And you don't know like what kind of possibilities that would unlock. But Mary wasn't too keen on the fact is that Boreal was like, yeah, but, maybe like government contracts, basically using her research for weapons, which obviously that's not what she's doing this for. But that's what I thought was kind of interesting. I thought Boreal would say the stuff that he thought her, people in this world would go for that, especially if the money's right. I mean, granted, our partner Oliver's kind of like, hey, we don't have much choice, so this opportunity is being presented to us. Let's jump onto it, on top of it, maybe. But obviously him meeting up with Culture later on, telling her about, Lyra, and it's like, well, I've got her in a trap. It's like, well, my daughter has a way of always finding a way out of any situation. So, because Boreal is so sure that it's like, oh, I've got her. There's no squirming out of this. She'll give me what I want, and then she's all yours, This episode also presented an interesting thing where they talk about the fact that I wonder why this is. But basically, she's like, in my world, you're not supposed to touch someone else's demon. Which was interesting because, like, obviously Boreal was touching her hand and his snake was crawling closer. And obviously, I guess just to kind of keep her emotions in check, she was, like, pinching or, like, pulling on the fur of her demon like crazy. I was like, oh. But we do see that they do manage to find themselves in the world that Lyra and Will are. So now let's take this opportunity to circle to what they're up to this episode, trying to find their way into the tower. And when they do, they find, like, the dude who was the bearer is tied up because there's some kid in there. I'm assuming, the way I guess he's like Angelica's brother or a friend or whatever. He was hiding out in the tower because I guess he's reached that age where the specters are after him. So I'm assuming it's a situation where the knife, obviously, we find out, like I said earlier, cuts through even the specters. So he was protected in there because it gave him a place to hide out. And if the specters came from him, he could defend himself, because I'm sure, like, if he had the knife around other people would probably want it for themselves. So this way he can protect himself from being like, the knife is only mine. I don't have to share it with anyone, and I protect myself. Leads to like a back and forth, which that, ends with Will getting his fingers cut off. I was like, oh, because, like, the moment there was a slice, I was like, wait, what just happened? Did he? And there's blood. I was like, oh, shit. He lost some fingers. And then the bearer was like, fight, boy. And then, Will using, the fight, and he kind of beat the dude up. And it's like, holy shit. So, but sadly, Will ends up passing out, but wakes up. And it was interesting how the bearer talked about it. He was like, basically, you have to focus on the knife because it goes from one hand to the other. Basically saying that going from my hand as a bearer to yours. And even pointing out that he lost the exact fingers, the ring finger and pinky, just like Will did. So I was like, is that supposed to be like fate's way of being like you? Like, is that supposed to be like a telltale sign of a bearer of, the subtle knife? So he ends up trying to teach Will how to use it. Obviously, Will's kind of having to fight through the pain, which Lyra is talking about. The fact is that, it's, she knows because, like, she had to, fight. She kind of had to accept her fear to, at one point when she was scared, and it's just like used to, like, accept that fear, and she was able to use the alethiometer. So Will's able to do it. Like I said, it's so trippy when you see it in action, and it's just kind of like, you slice through that seam, but also, like, you need to sheathe the knife, pinch it, and then you're able to close it. I was like, dude, it's like zipping something closed. I was like, that's so interesting. I like that aspect, because once again, one of the rules is, hey, any portal you open, you need to close it. Bad stuff will happen. Don't let it go to your head, essentially, like, as the guild kind of learned the hard way, as like when you use it for selfish reasons, it's kind of bad, but it's like never just show it off, which obviously makes you wonder, since those are being presented, it makes you think like, oh, this might be something that comes up later on, like he might end up breaking those rules. Maybe he won't. We'll have to wait and see. But obviously it's like protect the knife. It's like you are very brave and she is very wise. She will Lyra will be there for you. The knife will, it's like, but more so than anything, like protect the knife, and it will kind of, protect them. Because that was also what John was talking about. The fact is that if you use the knife, the bearer of the knife can protect Lyra, but he will also be dragging her into any danger, because the bearer has a destiny all on their own, and it will be fraught with danger. And Lyra, if she's being protected by him, will be dragged into it as well. Sadly, the previous bearer ended up killing himself, because I guess I can only assume, because he has a knife and everything, that and being in the tower and everything, he was a member of the guild. So he probably felt like, oh, I've lived so long, plus my mission of passing it on to the next person is complete, but also like I need to pay for my own crimes. It's like the guild is the reason why everything kind of fell apart here. Granted, they're not the only ones. It's also in Azrael, which obviously we saw last episode with Yorick, of like what kind of effect that portal, that doorway being open, has had an effect on them, like, when it comes to their food source and, his people. And so we've seen like the ramifications of Azrael's selfishness, of his need for discovery, which, yes, in the grand scheme of things, it seems like this is, it's for the greater good. But once again, it's like there's the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? But at the, end of the day, the bearer, he poisoned himself. And obviously the specters were coming after him, but they stopped. Because I guess, once again, it's like they're there to suck like the life out of you. So that's why I'm kind of confused. Like I said, we saw the one dude, so it's like obviously they're after your soul or whatever, but I guess it's like once they've taken your soul, you're just kind of a walking, like, lifeless, without a spark. Or maybe, and sometimes, like I said, we haven't seen other people running around, so it's like, do they devour the bodies too? Like, what happens on that front? But obviously the moment the home dude died, they didn't bother me, because it's like, I guess it's more so maybe just your life force is what they feed on. But we also see that Will is getting to that point, because he was looking and he could see like glimmers of the specters. He couldn't fully see them, but so that means he is on the cusp of being at that age where they're going to be coming after him now. Once again, they never really explain why the specters go after, like, why they're okay with just leaving. Maybe there's a deeper, point to that, like, maybe because once you've reached adulthood, that means like, oh, your energies or your soul or whatever is it's at that peak deliciousness. It's like maybe they're trying to wait for all the kids to get to a ripe age that they can, which obviously there's like a deeper metaphor for that, which I don't know if that deeper metaphor that's in my head where I'm like, that you could look at it and like that could be in a twisted metaphor for something, but it's like, I don't know if that's just my mind reading too much into that, or whether that's kind of the metaphor they're going for. You're like, oh, you're little and these other people are full grown adults it makes it seem kind of like have you going through puberty type of situation. And that's where I'm like, because once again, someone kind of put it in my head with the whole sins and the magisterium, and, the magisterium being a church, and, so like I said, I don't know if that's a situation where that's just kind of got incepted in my head, where it's like, I don't know if that's supposed to be a metaphor for that, or is it just simply like, it is simply just your life force takes so good when you're an adult. I don't know. Like I said, I could be just reading too much into it, but regardless, it is going to be interesting though. Like, it's like, okay, so we need to get the alethiometer back, so we're going to steal it because they can't give this knife to Boreal. So it's like, obviously it's like, but we're going to do this together. I even thought it was kind of cute how Lyra was walking backwards, and not just her, Pan was as well. It's like, don't worry, I'm not looking, I'm walking backwards. But I need to circle back to, because I brought it up earlier, the whole like not touching someone else's demon. But it's like, Lyra was like, yeah, in my world, you just don't touch someone else's demon. But Pam was like, it was me, I was trying to make you feel, trying to make Will feel better. So I thought that was kind of an adorable and interesting thing. Obviously, we see Home Dude who had the knife. He was trying to get away from the specters, and we see he ends up getting got. So, obviously, once again, Boreal and Coulter are in that world too. So it's only a matter of time before that whole situation plays out and they cross paths. Then on the other side of things, we have Mary, finally being able to kind of, using the cave, being able to talk to the dark matter and finally get responses. And it's like, oh, like, is the dark matter the same thing as dust? Yes. What are you? And it's like, we are angels. And it's like, okay, so we're getting in that realm of territory where it's like, and once again, I thought that was such an interesting thing that it kind of set up, obviously, I think that last season, but also this season, like that interesting combination of like religion and science. I think it might have been this show that I was talking about, just kind of like how, like, you kind of have that faith and, science kind of put together. But it's like that basically, what was it like? Spirit is what they are, matter is what they do. So spirit and matter coming together, and it's like, we are angels, and Mary's like, oh, you were with us the entire time. So it's like, you helped us basically help humanity evolve. And it's like, yes. And it's like, for what purpose? And it said revenge. And I'm like, what's that about? So I'm assuming, because obviously it's like Mary has her important role in all of this, obviously, like everyone does, because obviously, like, because of the alethiometer, Lyra knows that, so does Will. Like, he had something special about the town, and obviously now she's like, oh, it was the knife. And it's like, but what is Mary? It's like, I guess, because the whole point is understanding what dusk is, and I guess that's going to be such a focal point going forward with a lot of this. Or maybe, I don't know what to make of that, but like that vengeance was kind of like an interesting thing. I was like, who are you trying to get revenge against? Maybe this has something to kind of do with that, like, magisterium, like the whole thing about control, where they're just about kind of free. I don't know. I'm curious to kind of dive into that. And but also at the same time, we have Serafina getting Ruta to join her. It's like, oh, we're going to go after Lyra. And once again, witches in this are so dope. I like that whole like phasing thing they do. It was almost like this dope, almost scary thing you'd see in like a horror movie. Because obviously one of the magisterium dudes is looking out, and in the background you can see like a witch out there, amongst the clouds, and then she just kind of dashes away. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty neat. And then like Serafina going inside and just taking care of business. And I thought that was so impressive. Like, only like, they're literally like, what, 5 or 6 witches, and they took down all those ships by them. Each one, like, I think took down one by themselves. And it's like, that's clean cut and effective. I was like, holy crap. That was like boom, boom, boom. So that was really interesting. So they're on their way to rescue Lyra as well. So it's like, so many worlds colliding, so many fronts, it's like I said, Boreal and Miss Coulter are there. Obviously Lee and John are on their way, plus the witches being there, and obviously they got to get back their alethiometer. So there's so many moving parts at this time. I'm really excited to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.